I'm so sorry.
No, you're good.
I feel
You're
like
fine.
I'm causing all kinds of trouble today.
Well, you know what? For your
troublemaker.
punishment, you'll get to edit all this. So
Yeah.
there you go.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a nightmare.
I'm sorry about that. That sucks. So let's see. Where was I? What was the last thing you remember me saying, Jeremy?
Something profound.
He's like, I don't know. I checked
I
out.
was
Like,
I was like, nobody's moving. Why is this happening to me? So I kind of freaked out. That wasn't my intention.
well, do you want me to just start over?
Yeah.
With
From the very beginning. Welcome to the Dastardly Dingoes.
Oh man. Welcome to the Dastardly Dingoes Podcast, a show that celebrates all things nerdy. You'll get an insider's look into the world of comic books, graphic novels, TV and film, gaming and pop culture, as well as the technologies that drive all of it. Now, are you ready to get nerdy?
Welcome to the Dastardly Dingoes Podcast, the show about all things nerdy. We discuss nerd news, movies, TV shows, games, comics, and so much more. I'm Chad.
I'm Jeremy.
I'm Brian.
And brace yourselves, because we're about to get nerdy.
I hate you.
This week's guest is a true and real Renaissance man. Not only does he regularly host the Dastardly Dingoes podcast, but he is also a guest. Brian has held a variety of jobs, from computer technical support to extracting tissues from human corpses. Currently, he is the creator, writer, and artist of the intriguing and amazing comic book series Memoirs of an Angel, which is now in its 7th issue on Kickstarter. Ladies and gentlemen, Dingoes and Dingettes, I give you the master of mayhem, the paragon of the paranormal, the capital D Dingo of demonology, Brian Rodman.
What does that even mean?
It's like the nerdiest Tinder profile ever.
Please swipe left.
Yeah.
So, as you are swiping through Tinder, we wanted to welcome Brian. Was that intro worthy of our show?
That was probably the most interesting intro I've heard on the show. So well done, Chad.
Thank you. I had pretty big shoes to fill, so I tried my best on that. And as you all know, I am basically an empathetic sociopath, so it was very difficult for me to really conjure up that much emotion.
To show any emotion whatsoever is a work.
It is a work of art is really the word to use. You know, it's interesting because my wife and I talked about this, that inside, even when I'm talking like this, it's very monotone, but inside I'm like yelling and have lots of emotion, but it just comes out so monotone. I just can't help it.
From here to here, you've got like some security guard that's in your body. Like, no happiness.
I absolutely do. It's funny.
No joy.
I feel like I'm the same way.
You are. You're exactly the same way.
I feel like I am whenever I'm talking, I'm very energetic. But
yes,
when I listen back to it, I just sound like Beavis and Butthead. That's how my voice sounds when yes,
it's
like very like not much happening. Mouth is not moving very much at all.
That's it. Yep.
And see, I'm the opposite. I'm all happy and I'm dead inside. So there we go.
So, Brian, we are very excited to have you on the show.
I'm excited to be here. I wouldn't be anywhere else at this point in time.
Because not only are you an awesome friend, and I am honored to know you and watch your progress, not only as a person, but as a creator, I am very excited for you to talk about your project and to get that out, because it really is an amazing story. And I really want to unpack that and really get into the details of it. So really looking forward to this. So
thanks.
Welcome to the show. And we now knight you as the capital D of all Ds.
Please don't say that.
Dastardly Dingoes.
That is absolutely staying in.
This is a family show, sir.
Yes, I hope that makes the cut of the.
But you only
highlight
have
reel.
one editor, and that's me, and it's staying.
Yes. So, Brian, since you are both the author and artist behind this amazing book, Memoirs of an Angel, we have two specific questions for you. The first one is, who are your top 5 writers?
Okay. Top 5 writers. So from 1 to 5. First, top of the list is Neil Gaiman. I think he has the most original take on storytelling. His voice, even though it differs from book to book, is very much his own. And there's been one time in my career as a comic book creator that someone compared me to him as a writer, and I just lost my mind. Like I was just like, ah! And then immediately I was like, no, you're wrong. You have no idea what you're talking about. But no, like I've taken his master class, and he's just phenomenal writer. I think he understands storytelling better than most people. So yeah, Neil Gaiman's at the very top of the list.
Is there something specific about his writing style that you really like or try to emulate?
I think the uniqueness of his voice is not necessarily something that I try to emulate, because I want to, I strive to find my own voice. But how he goes about telling a story, like he hits all the points of like your traditional, like if he does the hero's journey, like he hits all the right points, but he goes the side streets, and he takes, and he'll take his time with it, and he'll venture into things that nobody else really has time for. And unlike Stephen King, because Stephen King does that too, but Stephen King, like I'll read Stephen King and be like, half this book is pointless to me. Yeah. Like I like Stephen King a lot. His books are great, but like I don't care what the story of the homeless guy on the corner that has nothing to do with what's happening. I don't care about that. So that's what Stephen King does. Neil Gaiman, literally everything that he, like every side street that he takes matters. And it always comes back to something bigger at the end, which I love. And he seems to take, kind of stereotypes and flip them on their heads. I think one of the best examples of that is in Sandman, his comic book series of Vertigo that he did. The first volume of Sandman, the character of Death, who is Dream, that's the main character, Dream's older brother or older sibling, right? So the whole time they're talking about death, and in your head, you automatically picture Death as this scary, masculine figure. By the time you get to the last issue, it's this goth girl who's funny. And it's just like, so he just completely like, he builds up, but he doesn't really, like, it's subtle throughout the whole thing, but you get a picture of who you think Death is going to be. And then he flips that on its head. And he does that very, very well. It's not abrupt. It's not, it's just, it's meticulously and artfully done.
Nice.
So, yeah, that's why I like Neil Gaiman so much. Number 2 on the list, and really number 2 and number 3, kind of just, they're interchangeable. They're kind of tied at both places, depending on the book. And that's C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien.
Yeah.
Those.
Who are they?
Jeremy, you wouldn't know because you don't read. But
I have seen a book.
I've seen it.
Does that count?
No.
Their books are made into movies, I guess.
That is true.
I've seen
yes.
those movies. Yeah.
So for those who don't know, C.S. Lewis is most famously known for his Chronicles of Narnia series, and J.R.R. Tolkien is most famously known for the Lord of the Rings and all his Middle-earth books.
And Silver a Million.
And the Silmarillion. So the Silmarillion, which I realized that I was a huge nerd when I picked up the Silmarillion, because everyone that I had talked to was like, if you like Lord of the Rings, like Lord of the Rings is a hard book, hard trilogy to read because you really just have to dive into it. I had no problem. And I was like, this is amazing. I'll eat it up. And then everyone was like, but if you like, you're not going to enjoy Silmarillion. Like it's like a textbook. And I was like,
pretty sure it's Silver a Million.
And I picked it up and I started reading it. The first 2 pages, I cried.
Because it was so hard to read?
No, I just hooked on phonics, didn't work. No, it was because it was so beautiful. He took because it talks about the creation of Middle Earth and the background of how it got, but the creation and it takes Genesis and essentially like puts it in high fantasy, and he describes it. And I mean, I love it. It's so good. So, but C.S. Lewis, I get, a lot of my base theology as a Christian. I line up a lot with C.S. Lewis. And so like I connect with him on that level, and he was just such an excellent apologist. He approached everything. I mean, he was an atheist who became a Christian. And through that process, and Tolkien was like one of the 2 people that really like intelligently discussed what Christianity versus atheism looked like. And that their relationship, their friendship, I love it. It blows me away to see 2 powerhouses of fantasy be essentially best friends. That's such a cool dynamic. So that's my 2 and 3. And then I would say 4 is probably Brian K. Vaughan. He wrote Saga. Yep. And many other different comics, but Saga, in my opinion, is his best work. It is fantastic. And then Frank Miller is my 5th. Frank Miller got me into comics when, like, as a teenager, like really into comics with The Dark Knight Returns. Or no, sorry. First came Daredevil. I read his Daredevil books, Born Again and The Man Without Fear, and it just captivated me. Then I read The Dark Knight Returns, and then I read 300 and Sin City, and it was just like, this is what comics are. Like, this is what it's about. And so, and in his elder years, he's not the best writer anymore. Like he was sick, and he's got some really harsh views on some things that aren't that popular, but that can't take away from what he's accomplished and what he's done as a writer and an artist in comics. He's phenomenal. So he's absolutely in my top 5. So yeah.
Saga, I approach the same way Jeremy approaches comic books. It's one of those that I bought to look at because it's so pretty.
Yeah.
But I know it's a really good story. I just haven't sat down and actually read through the whole story. I've read bits and pieces, like certain issues and stuff. I have the hardback volume 1, and I want to get all of them. Like once get the whole series and then read through it all, like sit down and read through it all. Another one like that is 7 to Eternity.
Yes. So gosh, so good.
Those 2, 7 to Eternity, I think is I don't know if I would put it as number 1, but it's definitely the best artwork in a comic book I've ever seen.
It's phenomenal. You actually pointed me to it when it first came out, and I immediately bought it. And I mean, there are some panels I would absolutely in volume 1. There are panels in there that I think are the best work in comics ever.
It's incredible.
Detail, angle, everything. Just poetry in art form, I think.
Yep. So Saga, Brian K. Vaughan and Saga is amazing. What's his name? What was the last one you just said?
Frank Miller.
Yeah, Frank Miller. I'm sorry. Frank Miller is really controversial to me because everyone makes such a big deal about his art, but I just really have a hard time with his art. Like, I just don't like it. And I don't understand why people are so fascinated by it. Like, I remember there's a Batman that came out that he drew in the book, and like Batman was like way out of proportion. His legs were like doing weird things, and like it wasn't even a stylistic thing. It was like, dude, you don't even know anatomy. Like, what are you doing? Like, and that's me just being like super judgmental and all that kind of stuff. But
I would say to that, what he's done, all that is intentional. and I wrote a book because he and Will Eisner. He was well.
I
didn't even know.
I thought that too. I was like, dang, you wrote a book and you didn't even tell us about it? Thanks, man. That's for a whole nother show.
Yeah.
Well, no,
it's a different Kickstarter.
I read a book that he wrote.
You read a book. Okay.
Sorry. And
this is how the whole interview is going to go. Every slip up we're jumping on.
I know, and that's fair. That's fair. It should be that way. If it wasn't, I'd be insulted. So so the book that he wrote with Will Eisner, it was essentially just them hanging out and being interviewed and talking to each other about the creation process. Both of them did similar things with anatomy. Like they wanted to get further away from realism. And so with Frank Miller's career, you can absolutely see that, like from his Daredevil days, which looks phenomenal. I mean, if you haven't watched read his early Daredevil comics that he wrote and illustrated, they're phenomenal. The artwork is great. It's still Frank Miller, but he gets anatomy correct. Like it's the traditional Marvel style of drawing. Yeah. And so, I mean, he really pushed the boundaries of what comic book art should look like in the mainstream. And so he just continued to do that to a point where a lot of people just don't really care for it. And I will say his newest stuff, I'm not a huge fan of his art. Like The Dark Knight Returns or The Dark Knight Strikes Again, not a huge fan of the art style there. But The Dark Knight Returns, I love. So, I mean, I think but ultimately, I think the best work he's ever done is Sin City. I think his black and white pieces, I mean, I think almost every page could be framed and put on a wall in that series. And it's just gritty noir pulp storytelling at its best. And his art with the black and white design and his storytelling in that genre, perfect. So
nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just pulled it up. I like.
Yeah, I'm looking at his Daredevil stuff right now.
Yeah. See?
Very cool.
All right. Brian, we talked about your favorite writers. What about your top 5 favorite artists?
That for a lot of people who know these people will be pretty obvious if you've seen my work. And that is Mike Mignola is my top favorite. I absolutely love his approach to art. It's simplistic yet complex at the same time. He utilizes shapes. He utilizes shapes and shading, like heavy blacks, to really, like, your mind just fills in the blanks, and he does it so well. And I just like, his work on Hellboy. Hellboy is probably my favorite comic book series of all time. Including the BPRD and all the spinoffs. Like, it's from the beginning to end is just an amazing story. He pulls from folklore of different countries and just throws Hellboy in the middle of it. And but his art style is honestly something in my head. Whenever I write memoirs, I picture Mike Mignola is one of the people that I picture when I'm writing, and then when it comes out of my pen onto the tablet, it's me. but Mike Mignola is the first person. The second person that, in my artwork kind of blends these two together is Mike Mignola and Bruce Timm. Bruce Timm did the Batman the Animated Series, and all of the artwork, all of it's based on his artwork and his style. And so yeah, Bruce Timm is my second, and those two really are the ones who have shaped me the most as an artist. I'm just fascinated with just their style, because they're both so iconic. Like, if you see their work, you know exactly who drew it, and I love that. The third would be, go ahead.
Batman the Animated Series is like the first thing I think of is those like very strong lines. You know, like when I can see like when Batman is standing and there's like it's almost like one line from his foot up to his shoulder. You know, where he's. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's not necessarily like that it's simple. It's that like he's not taking any like clothing folds or anything like that. It's very sleek. I like
and
that.
It's very reminiscent of the Max Fleischer Superman cartoons from the 40s. And, you know, Bruce Timm was very open with that. That was who he was emulating with his style. But I think on the Bruce Timm note, a huge inspiration for me is just traditional 80s and 90s animation, specifically specifically done by, oh gosh, I just blanked on his name. That's not good. Don Bluth. There it is. Specifically done by Don Bluth. So The Secret of Nim, you know, All Dogs Go to Heaven.
I like that one.
all those movies, like they were kind of the anti-Disney, and they were, you know, Land Before Time. Like they really competed against Disney in the late 80s and early 90s. And it's funny, Bruce Timm was a part of those movies. Cool. And so he took that style and kind of warped it into his own and did Batman the Animated Series. So, you know, I have to lump in Don Bluth's movies with Bruce Timm because they have also inspired me in huge ways. Mostly in like just design and color. That I think those are like, when I think of Memoirs of an Angel specifically, I would be totally fine with just giving it to the animation team that did The Secret of Nim. And just be like, here, go do this. And I would be completely happy. And then after Bruce Timm would be Frank Miller, which we've already talked about. And then Todd McFarlane would be after that.
I did not expect that.
It's Seth.
I think. No, Seth MacFarlane is not in my top 5 artists of all time.
No, you're talking about the guy that did Spawn.
Yes. Yeah. And I think
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, I know you do. There's I think the big reason that Todd McFarlane is so high on my list is what he did with comics in the 90s. I mean, he essentially gave the bird to Marvel and DC, literally. and you know, him and his buddies went and did Image Comics, which is the first indie endeavor that was very successful other than Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in comic book history. And I mean, he is not anywhere near my top anything in writers lists, but when he comes to art, like, he just throws in so much crazy detail and it works. Like, I could stare at a Spawn comic for hours and not read the story, just look at it because it's so pretty. And I think, you know, there were things that I have just learned from, you know, Todd McFarlane there for a while. I don't know if he still does or not. He on social media would give drawing lessons, digital drawing lessons. And I watched all of them at the time that he was doing them every day. Like, and I learned so much from him. From those videos, I learned so much, and just how to do things well digitally. And every now and then you'll see, you know, kind of a Todd McFarlane-esque panel or something that's tucked away in there because he's been such a key inspiration. And then lastly, is John Romita Jr. He's most famous for Spider-Man, doing a huge run for Marvel. In doing Spider-Man as well as Daredevil. He worked with Frank Miller. Frank Miller wrote and he drew Daredevil, the Man Without Fear.
You can kind of see some Frank Miller influence, it seems like, in some of the panels I'm looking at here.
Like they do have similar, you know, kind of cartoony styles. But he's the son of John Romita, who is like one of the original Marvel artists. But
is that where he gets the junior from?
Yeah, you know.
That's another guy.
Yeah, it's not somebody else. No, yeah, but I think, you know, I love his blocky style. I think that it's very unique, and it's very, like I said, I love artists where you look at their work and you know exactly who did it. I love that, because I think so many other people, like, where they're so good, you could look at them and be like, I have no clue who this is. Even if you do know their work, it's hard to tell because it looks like everybody else's stuff.
Yeah.
But I love it when they're good artists that have a very unique style, that, it's just very recognizable.
Yeah. And I've just kind of been like following along because I don't know everybody. I'm trying to get better at that, but I've just been like typing in when you're talking about these artists, and I can definitely tell, I can see your stuff in all of these people, especially like the use of like contrast and shadow, like, rather than this like very like almost a gradient, like drop off into darker. It's just like, this is for sure black. This is just 100% black, and I don't mind that. Like, I think that looks good. So I can see that for sure.
I was actually really surprised to hear you say Todd McFarlane, just because of how different the style is from Mike Mignola and the amount of detail he uses. And I will say, when you were talking about how pretty his panels are, like, doing that detail is really difficult to pull off well, because like, I've tried to do it, and it, like, if you do too much detail, it gets real messy real quick. And especially if you're trying to do like his style, where it just seems random, and like he uses detail in a way that almost shows texture and like helps form, characters and stuff. But still, that it's really difficult to do. And he makes it look so easy. And I've heard him talk about it. It's like, well, the easiest thing to draw is trash in the corner, because there's nothing to refer to. So you just draw it. And it's like,
something he said that it always sticks with me. And he said it on one of his, he was drawing one of his demons from Spawn in a lesson online. And he said, the best thing about drawing monsters is you can play with the anatomy. Yeah, you don't have to get the joints right in different places. Like, you can literally do whatever you want, because there's nothing to refer to here.
Yeah,
they can have a foot on their head.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. And me drawing demons in Memoirs, my mind goes to that statement every time I start to draw one. I'm just like, what can I do that's just crazy off the wall?
Yeah,
and it doesn't. I don't have to make every demon look like a human with weird eyes. Like, it can be whatever you want to be.
Yep. On a personal note, that's a big reason why I don't like doing commission stuff, because you're forced to this character and it has to look like that character. Whereas when you make your own characters up, like he said, you can just do whatever you want. Like, it doesn't have to, conform to anything. So, okay. So Brian, let's shift a little bit here, and we want to really talk about your book and your comic book series. Let's start kind of at the beginning as a bit of an introduction for anyone that's never heard of you or heard of the book. Just give us a brief, summary of what the story is, and tell us why Memoirs. Why did you create this story? Why are you making this book? Why should someone get into Memoirs of an Angel?
Sure. So Memoirs of an Angel is a horror fantasy comic book series. And the general pitch is it's a ragtag group of infinite and finite beings who race through time and space to rescue a broken witch hunter from the clutches of the Dark Kingdom. And in pretty much every issue, you will see it is very much like Lord of the Rings meets The Exorcist. That's probably the best way to describe it. It has that high fantasy, world building, and high fantasy look about it, and as well as the demonic horror and the spooky stuff. So it's a blend of those two things. And I think I think that's what makes the series pretty unique. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But I think why, probably the biggest reason why I created this story is, I was a junior in high school, and I went to see Blade 2 in theaters. And I walked out of that theater and I was like, this is one of the greatest, superhero movies I've ever seen in my life. It's awesome. I love vampires. I love monsters. It was fantastic. And I essentially created a character who was essentially Blade, but with demons instead of vampires. That was it. And honestly, that was the beginning of Memoirs of an Angel. And a big thing that shapes that, the reason that, you know, I gravitated towards angels and demons is because I'm a Christian. And that the supernatural stuff has always fascinated me because my worldview is steeped in it. You know, the Bible is saturated with supernatural events and supernatural beings. And so naturally, I'm curious about that stuff. And I went on, you know, after high school, I went on to go to Bible college and studied biblical studies and just, you know, worldview and really study why I believe what I believe. And through that time, and I was actually at the time preparing for vocational ministry as a youth pastor or a biblical counselor or one of the two, and which I never really did either, other than just, you know, internships and things. But the whole time that I was in school for that, my mind in every class, when I would learn, I was taking notes during lectures, I would just off to the side write an idea about memoirs. And I would just be like, oh, this would be really cool to put in here, and this would be really cool to have this, you know, connect here. And I did that for years. And you know, I never really thought I would be here making a comic book series professionally. It was just one of those things like, you know, I'll be a pastor or something like that. And, you know, a lot of pastors will write books and things like that. I may do something like that down the road. That was essentially where my head was at. But, you know, so fast forward, I ended up going a different direction and didn't get into vocational ministry. And that's when I started really considering turning this thing into a comic book series. And what it is for me personally, it is a way for me to take my faith, everything that I've learned, everything that means the most to me in my life, and tell a story. And I always wanted something like this. And you know, I wanted to be able to pick up a comic book and read a really well thought out, really well plotted, really well drawn and colored comic that had something to do with, you know, angels and demons, that was actually more like, that was actually along the biblical lines, that wasn't family friendly, that wasn't, you know, the angels weren't just people with wings, you know, like you read the Bible, angels are not people with wings. Nowhere in the Bible. Like the only time that angels have wings in the Bible, they're terrifying. And they're like wings and eyes, and you don't really understand what's going on. And then the people are terrified, and the angel's like, it's okay, I'm fine. And they're like, no, I'm not okay. What are you doing? And like, you don't see that in a lot of Christian entertainment. Yeah. So the two things that drove me was I wanted to tell people about what I believed and why I believed it. And I didn't want to just hand out tracts at a local mall and be that weirdo, you know, like I didn't want to do that. I wanted to take my gifts, the things that I love, and share them with people, and tell them what means the most to me. And I wanted to do it by also, you know, other people that were in my shoes were there looking for something like this, and it's not there. You know, all they see is like the Hallmark Channel stuff, or, you know, cheesy things that you just, okay, whatever, you know, and this is like hardcore in your face horror fantasy, you know, and you just don't really get that in the Christian, you know, culture. So those were the biggest things that drove me to create this story.
Now, was there a particular event or person or thing that happened to motivate you or to push you to go from writing down all these ideas to actually creating a comic book?
There were key people throughout my life. My parents were always very encouraging. You know, I have chronic asthma, and so it's very hard for me to do anything active. And so when I was a kid, I was really, really bad. You know, my asthma was really bad. And so my parents, you know, put pencil and paper in front of me while I was hooked up to my breathing machine. And that was kind of always my go-to, was my comfort zone. And my parents really fed into that. They really were encouraging. They were really like, yeah, you know, I mean, my parents at the same time were like, you should probably, you know, like get a job that you can pay bills with, and so like they weren't, because they I mean, they understood how the world worked, and so I appreciate that. But at the same time, they never discouraged me from pursuing comics. They never discouraged me from also doing this. And so they were a constant. I think a key person, and at the beginning of my trade paperback for volume 1, I mentioned my youth pastor, Doug. Was there was one day, one night, it was like it really hit me. Like, it was like 2 a.m. I don't remember what led up to it, but I was just like, what if I retold the Bible from the spiritual perspective of things, from the angels and demons perspective, from the unseen realms perspective? And that's not what Memoirs is, but that was the thought that I had. And so the next day I drove to Doug's office, and I told him this, and I told him all the ideas that I had. And this was before I went to Bible college, really. And, or I had just started, and he freaked out. Like he was so excited with me. He was so encouraged. And he was the first person other than my parents to really like validate that, like validate that this is something that is a need. This is something that you should do. And so like, he really was encouraging, and really, and I was like 19 at the time, and that was huge for me.
Yeah.
That was absolutely huge, because, at the time, especially, this was way before comics were any kind of mainstream in our culture. Yeah. And so like, for him to take an interest in that and to really hear me out, we even we set up like a real business meeting, and he, we met, and he was like, hey, like, what's your goal here? What do you want to do? And all these things. And so, that was huge. Yeah. And then really the person that, the series would not be real without my wife, without Robin. It went from just dreams to reality because of her. Yeah. I wasn't, at the time when we were dating and getting married, I had no idea about business, had no clue how to do a business, had no clue actually how to make a comic. Really. I had all these ideas and nowhere to put them, and no real means to actually make this a reality. And I went to a Comic-Con. I listened to a couple panels, and I was like, I think I want to do this. And I came home, and Robin finally sat me down, and she was like, look, she said, either do this or stop talking about it. Like, it's one or the other. She said, because you've done nothing but talk about this, off and on since I've known you. And she is a business guru. Like, she knows business. I mean, she went to college for it. That's her degree is in accounting, and she has such an entrepreneurial spirit, and she's brilliant. And so she took my idea, and together, we made this a reality. But I would never have gotten this thing off the ground without her. So those are like I would say the pivotal. And I will say this, mostly because if I don't, she'll punch me in the mouth. But also because it's very much true. My sister Amy was, and her husband Jason, both of them were always very much in my life, pointing me towards, like Amy taught me how to draw. Her and my dad really, developed that in me. And so the whole time, like when all these ideas and all this was going on, they were always there as well to just be super encouraging and really helpful and kind of shape me in those ways.
That's awesome.
That's cool. What do you think? What do you think makes Memoirs different from other comic books?
I think I kind of touched on that a little bit. I started to earlier. I think the thing that is the most unique about it is it's probably one of the few comics that's out there that is very much steeped in the biblical worldview. I think and I think it might be one of, if not the only comic book series that's out there that is a horror story steeped in the biblical worldview. It's very much I'm utilizing the Bible and biblical theology. I'm utilizing those things to world build. The world of Memoirs. And so it's not just me making up rules. It's rules that have been around for, my goodness, thousands of years. And it's these, the world building rules have been around for thousands of years, and theology and doctrine and all these different things that I learned about in college. I learned about it, at church and just studying the Bible on my own. And so to take all of those things and put them in a horror fantasy comic is something that's pretty unique. Not a lot of comic books go that route, and when they do, they don't really turn out that great. And I'm not trying to bolster my story over theirs, but I've read them. As a Christian, I don't relate. It's there are a few out there. I think Hybrid Sons of God by Luke Stone is similar in tone to what I'm doing, and he's a pastor, and so we have similar in, I guess, similar things that drive our storytelling, and in different ways.
Can you say his name again? At least on my end, you cut out when you said his name.
Oh yeah, it's Luke Stone.
Okay, yeah.
And so, and his story is more superhero based, but it's not cheesy. It's really good. And but anyway, yeah, I think another thing that is pretty unique that makes this comic stand out above others is it is a horror fantasy. It's very much, the Lord of the Rings meets the Exorcist. It is very much how you would describe this comic. And it's funny, Brian K. Morris described it that way to somebody on a panel a couple months ago, and the person was like, wait a minute, hold on, what does that even mean? It's like, and so like that description alone will grab your attention, because when I say that at the table at Comic Cons, I say, yeah, it's like Lord of the Rings meets the Exorcist, and the people are always like, whoa, okay, that's different. And yeah, I mean, I like that. I think that's something that you're really going for whenever you are making a comic, is you want it to stand out in a way that's appealing to people.
Brian, one thing I was thinking about when you talked about your youth pastor taking such an interest in that, in your book and your idea, is so awesome, because so many youth pastors, and this is not a shot at them at all, I just feel like would have been more like, yeah, it's a fun idea, whatever, but we've got, Wednesday night stuff going on. We've got this thing going on. Yeah, definitely you should go do it. But for him to like actually take time out and meet with you and like go through the idea and encourage you in that way is awesome.
Yeah. It was really cool. And I was in a place in life that I was, like I think most teenagers and most, people when they're 18, 19, especially nowadays, rarely people know exactly what they want to do. They're still trying to figure out who they are. And it was very much that. Yeah. And Doug, was exactly what I needed at that time. And really was able to just encourage me in the right ways and challenge me in the right ways.
That's awesome.
So, yeah.
Jeremy, you'll probably have to do your editing magic, because my point I just made was actually for like 2 questions ago, and I just remember what I was about to say before we went in that break. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, it's crazy to me, because people, especially when it comes to like Christians and Christianity, just feel like we shouldn't talk about demons. Yeah. Like that's almost like a taboo thing. Like, oh, you're talking about demons and all that, but really, we should have the most to say about it, And so the fact that you're doing a book about that and how the spiritual world and the real world intermix is it's awesome. It's amazing.
I think that probably, I don't know this for for sure, but I think probably if I had gotten Brian's comic as like in middle school or high school, my parents would be like very suspicious of it. You know what I mean? Just because like that's just the nature of like evangelical parents. You know, that those sort of things you just don't talk about, you know, that sort of thing. Now, when I was older, like, you know, in high school, I read like Frank Peretti or something like that.
Yeah.
Which I think there's a big difference. And it's not that the story is any different, because I think there are some definite similarities, but I think it's just the images, right? He didn't have pictures in his book, so it's not scary, it's not bad, but you've got blood. There's a lot of fire, you know. And so, but I think like you said, you know, we should have that should be a part of our worldview. That should be a part of like what we discuss at church. You know, like, what does this actually mean? So yeah, I mean, I think you're doing something that is necessary. That, and I think it's a good thing.
Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah. And in our family, the one thing that we struggle with is like my 10-year-old son really loves Bendy and the Ink Machine. And there's like straight up demons in that. Like, it's really dark. Yeah. And it's a cartoon, but it's not coming from a Christian worldview. Right. And so like horror is really a huge industry, and it's tapping into younger kids. And I'm not saying your book is just for young kids. What I'm trying to say is that here you've produced another option, another take on that, on horror, on the horror genre, that's engaging, and that I wouldn't be afraid for my kids to look at, because I know it's coming from a different perspective, you know. So
and I think, you know, I'm an advocate for the horror genre across the board anyway. I was introduced I was introduced to horror at a young age, but I was a huge pansy when I was a kid as well. So like, I was scared of everything when I was like in grade school, but then Goosebumps kind of rescued me from that.
I feel like this is a personal attack.
Read Goosebumps, Chad.
I'll start there.
Yeah, that's where I started when I was in third grade. But no, like R.L. Stine was my first real introduction to horror, and then it was that and the series Are You Afraid of the Dark? Both of those really pushed the limits for my boundaries for horror when I was a kid, because I was like third, fourth grade when I was reading and watching this stuff, and I think that's a good thing, and I think the reason that I think introducing kids to horror at a young age, I think that's appropriate to them. I mean, I know some people choose to go ahead and let people, you know, their kids watch like Freddy, and stuff like that, which I wouldn't, but okay. I've heard arguments that, you know, that are, you know, okay, we can go there, but you know, I think it's good to introduce that, because especially in the Christian worldview, because I've said this before to different people, as Christians, we have to acknowledge we believe some crazy stuff. Yep. Like, we believe crazy things that are true. You know, like, we believe that. Like, we absolutely believe that God, who is 3 in 1, there you go, start off there, crazy town. You know what I mean? Like, what does that even mean? And, you know, people have dedicated their entire lives to studying and researching what that means, but we believe it. And we believe it wholeheartedly. I believe it wholeheartedly. You know, it shapes how I live my life. But at the end of the day, you do have to look at it and go, if I'm not a Christian and I look at these things, it looks insane. You know? So, but as Christians, we also have to acknowledge that we do believe things that, you know, are out there. So why do we shy away from other things that we believe that are just as out there? you know, like demonic stuff, you know, like you know, the unseen realm. That's really, if you pay attention and you understand what the Bible is actually saying from its own context, it's all over the place.
Yeah.
It's all over the Bible, but we don't talk about it. We don't teach it. And that's a huge problem.
Yeah. Or if it's taught like there's a demon behind everything.
Exactly.
It's overemphasized.
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's why I think that's why so many, like Jeremy, like you said, you know, so many evangelical parents shy away from that stuff. Like when I was a kid, I remember my mom let me watch it because I begged her, but like she was not cool with me watching The Nightmare Before Christmas because it starred a skeleton. You know, and it was just like, but that's no longer her worldview. Like she doesn't like that, but like, you know, like a lot of evangelicals were shaped by that worldview of anything dark, anything evil looking was satanic, and it would drag you to the gates of hell immediately.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, like you like a lot of these things you have to get at the heart of the story. Nightmare Before Christmas, even though it does star a skeleton, has absolutely nothing to do with hell.
Yeah.
Right. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like it has everything to do with figuring out who you are and where you belong in this world. That's the point. It's a very good story, and it's told through spooky things. That's great. You know, and I think that's what a lot of misconceptions about the horror genre to begin with. And I do think there are some horror movies that are literally just there. Most of the Friday the 13th movies are literally just there for the kills. They're there for the blood and the gore. And that's not really my thing. I don't mind that stuff, but that's not why I watch horror. I like the stories. Yeah, I think the perfect example is The Conjuring. You know, I would say The Conjuring is one of the best Christian movies out there. I would say the same thing about The Book of Eli, starring Denzel Washington.
Oh, I love that show or that movie.
Yeah, they are the best, I think, absolute best Christian movies out there because it's real, it's gritty, it's not, you know, happy fairy tale land.
Yeah,
and it promotes the gospel, not really in your face preaching. It's just you pay attention to the story, key biblical themes. Foundational biblical themes. I mean, the Book of Eli, the whole purpose of the Bible, or the whole purpose of the movie, is that the Bible has power. Yeah. And whoever has the Bible will be able to, you know, to have some supernatural power about them. I mean, that is a biblical theme. And Eli, Denzel Washington's character, the whole purpose is for him to protect the Bible from evil, to get it to a place where it will be, you know, essentially stored, mass produced, so that it will get to people again. Yeah, that's a missionary. You know what I mean? Like, and that's not a stretch. Like, that's exactly what he's doing. He's going through the valley of the shadow of death in this post-apocalyptic world. Yeah, to get to this other side, which is paradise-like, to, you know, and brings people along the way, and talks about the Bible along the way, and teaches someone how to pray along the way. Like, it is one of the best Christian movies out there. It was funny on social media the other day, a group of very much evangelical, you know, Hallmark type people asked what good Christian movies there are to watch, and I suggested Book of Eli, and I mean it absolutely. It wasn't just me trolling. I really do think that The Conjuring, I would even say The Exorcist, is I mean, you know, any horror movie that really brings the Christian theme into it, if it's told well and it stays true to the biblical worldview, you know, I think we need more of those things. And I think we need more of those things in the horror genre as well. Yeah.
So do you think that, like, because when you said The Exorcist, my mind, and talking in the same vein as like a good Christian movie, my mind immediately went to all of the like vulgar stuff that she says. So do you think that, like, where do you see that, the place of, like, do you see it as like, well, this is just really actually what people who have been possessed by a demon, like, they're not in control of themselves. So it's more of like a documentary in that, like, we're just, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Well, first of all, I would say The Exorcist is not anything like what a real possession is. It's very, but I get what you're saying. It's specifically talking about the vulgar things that she says and does in the movie. I don't have a problem with it. What you're looking at is the absolute face of evil. Evil doesn't care about cuss words. Evil doesn't care about those things. You know what I mean? Like real evil that you find in the Bible. And people that, and don't get me wrong, there's a line here, right? Like you know, as a Christian, like for me, I don't have a problem saying this. I stopped watching Game of Thrones because I don't need to put that much sexual nudity in front of me. I know my own personal boundaries. That is not something that I want to consume a lot of, especially when it doesn't have anything to do with the story, really. It's just kind of there, like there's an orgy in the background and there's, you know, like I don't want that. I don't need that. For me personally, that's my boundaries as a Christian. I don't. So there is a line, right? And I think that line's different for everybody. So like, I think the content that you choose to watch should play into this. If you have to, you know, work with your conscience here, you know, don't just say, you know, I probably shouldn't watch this, but I'm going to anyway.
Said it.
Right. Exactly. Like, yeah, right. Like, don't do that. Don't hear that. That's not what I'm saying here. But what I am saying here is if you made a movie about the Old Testament, it would be NC-17. Period.
Yeah.
I mean, it just would be. And
stakes through people's heads and people's balls,
ripping. But like, there's a graphic scene. I can't remember exactly where it is in the Old Testament, but it's in I think it might actually be in one of the first or second Kings. I don't remember, but it's a story about a guy. Chad, you probably know who this is, where the guy stabs the really fat guy.
Yeah,
and all of his entrails come out, and
as you said Kings, I was like, that's where he's going.
Yeah. And I'm like, if you had that in a movie, immediately rated R.
Yeah,
immediately rated R. And like
the fact that the guy like snuck in, like,
yes,
it was like surreptitiously, like,
right, and the great part about that story is that's not a good thing. That just happened, right? Yeah. Like the Bible isn't actually saying this guy's a hero. He's awesome. Actually, he's just the Bible's saying, hey, this is a really messed up situation, but this is what happened, you know, and that's life. Life is messed up. Life is gross. Sometimes life is vulgar. You know, I mean, I think the thing that really kind of just, you know, made me have a different perspective about this is I worked with middle school and high school boys who had behavior disorders. You do that for a little while, you realize your perspective on this stuff, like it changes a little, you know. I mean, like I'm not going to be offended and leave because you say a cuss word like that. Come on, man. That's not, you know what I mean? That's not helpful. And that's not real. Like, that's not realistic.
Yeah. It's so funny. We try to sanitize the Bible, like the biblical stories and things in it. But, you know, I was talking to my chef the other day at work and I was like, yeah, it's one thing to say like Jesus is a good person until you sit there and think, well, he was a homeless guy that told you he was going to die and come back from the dead and that you needed to eat his flesh and drink his blood. Like,
and that he is the only way to actual real life and that he is God. Yeah.
And if someone did that today, we'd put him in an insane asylum. Exactly. And we wouldn't call that person a good person. And the interesting conclusion and he basically came to it himself. It was basically like, yeah, there's no middle ground, is there? I was like, no. Like, we try to sanitize it. We try to make, Jesus is a good person. All these stories are fun stories and teach good moral lessons. But like you guys were saying, like, you read the actual stories, like, there's moral lessons there. Yeah. And Jesus is a good person, but there's a lot more going on there. Yeah. And I think sanitizing it doesn't do anything for those stories. And that's why I think your comic book is so effective and so helpful, because it doesn't do that.
Yeah. And like I said, you're kind of to bring it back around. That's why I do it this way. That's why I chose the horror genre as alongside fantasy is I think the best way to depict evil is to show it as ugly and as gross as it is, because then that something that we could look at it absolutely terrifies us. Yeah. But then you look at in the story something that is that scary, that demented, that gross looking, is terrified of angels and God. That makes that you realize how good, how powerful God is when you see the amount of evil at its true form. You don't sanitize it. You don't try to make it family friendly. It's and then God shows up and it cowers. That's powerful. Yeah. And that's what I wanted to show here. Is I wanted to show evil in its most horrifying form. That also was, fit the story and was entertaining. It's not just Hellraiser on every page, but it's like, like at the same time, like there are in this issue, there are characters who are inspired by the characters in Hellraiser, the demons in Hellraiser, and they have chains and hooks and blood and all this stuff in it. And it's gross. There's a reason that on the back of the books, it says for mature readers. Because it's not family friendly. And if that's what you're looking for, that's not what this is.
Yeah. So tell us, since you referred to this issue, tell us a bit about issue number 7 and where does it fall in the overall canon of Memoirs of an Angel?
Yeah, sure. Well, it fits in between issue 6 and issue 8.
Wait, what?
That was a good one.
I know, right? No, it was so I did something a little different that most comic book series don't do. With issue 1, it actually takes place in the future. And then the rest of the series so far is 25 years prior to issue 1. Like we have referenced issue 1. We have talked about it. There has been, you're starting to slowly connect dots as to what happens in between. It's raising questions, but so what's happened so far is the main character Jonathan, which you meet in issue 1, who is a broken, bitter witch hunter who is on this quest to no holds barred, just destroy this particular witch that he's been tracking for 6 years, who has done something to him, and he's just, that's all he's focused on. His tunnel vision is just rage. And so he doesn't care what happens to him. He just wants to kill her. And you see that their fight scene happen, their climactic moment happen in issue 1, and he loses. And so from that point, we flash back, or we go back to 25 years prior to these events. And that's where we're introduced to the main 2 angelic characters, Moriel and Acalian. And they are kind of off on their own doing their different things. And they're brought together by the Archangel Michael to go to the specific place in the world where there is a what's called a demonic stronghold that Gabriel is trying to penetrate but cannot. And he's been there for a few years. And there has been whispers of a child who is highly possessed, and they don't know why. So Moriel and Acalian go to assist Gabriel and investigate this and attempt to locate this boy who is possessed by a demon called Zexus. And he is the last of Legion that you find in the New Testament. He's very powerful, and normally in this world, a demon that is that powerful wouldn't just focus on a normal boy. So that's kind of the mystery of all this, is why is this happening? Who is this boy? What's going on here? Because it's very irregular and very abnormal for this to happen. So where we pick up is Acalian and Moriel have and Gabriel, they have located the boy. The boy, spoiler alert, the boy is Jonathan from issue 1. So this is in the past. So they've located Jonathan, and they are essentially about to storm the gates of Hillcrest Sanitarium, which is where he's being held. And so there's also, on the other hand, in the physical realm, two clergymen, for better terms. They're called clerics in the book, that are Mattia and Obadiah, and they have been trying to save this boy, and trying to figure out, is there a darker, purpose behind why the High Council that's in charge of his care, why are they keeping him, the way that he is? What's happening here? Because their worldview and their religion of this community. Sorry, my cat is just all about me. Is very, anti-demons, anti-spiritual things. It's all very kind of science-based mysticism. It's an interesting combination of that. So they're just trying to figure out, okay, are demons real? Do they exist? How do we approach this boy, and how do we help him best? So you've got two things, two groups of individuals, colliding on both, from both realms, and trying to, and at the center of it, you have Jonathan, who is possessed by this very powerful demon, and we don't know why. So that, and really, this is, I call this issue, just a key, just a key issue that really is a payoff issue for people who have been reading so far, because the tension has just been building. And in this issue, no holds bar action. There's a battle in the spiritual realm that's just crazy. And, there's definitely Lord of the Rings meets The Exorcist, very much so in this issue. There's some heavy possession, Hollywood possession type stuff that you see in this issue as well.
Cool. So now that you have done your 7th issue, what are some of the things that you have learned along the way? What are you still struggling with? What have you gotten better at? Or, what are some of the struggles that you still have with telling the story? Sure.
I think the biggest struggles that when I started off, I didn't know how to make comics. I knew what I saw, but I didn't learn any of this professionally or, through college or anything like this, or anything like that. I genuinely just taught myself how to do it. And then finally I took some classes, watched some YouTube videos. Getting to know other creators was huge. And so I think the biggest thing that has changed that I've learned so far is just how to do my craft better. I think line work, coloring have been two huge things that I really had to improve on from issue 1. I look back at issue 1 and there are some pages that I'm really proud of in that issue, but you compare issue 1 to stuff that I'm putting out on social media right now for issue 7, night and day different, in my opinion. And I'm like most artists, I will look at my work always and be very judgmental. But I'm very proud of pages that I have put out in issue 5, 6, and now 7. I think are some of the best work. Is some of the best work that I've done. I'm pretty proud of it.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about that before the show. Just the growth that I've seen from the first issue now up to the 7th issue, particularly in how well just your technique has become in the line work and the coloring and the composition, the detail, which has really been enjoyable to see. And I'm very excited about this new issue and what we have coming up in the future for sure. So tell us a little bit about your creative process. What does it look like to make a single issue? What are the kind of the steps along the way to make these books?
So it's funny. We had Stephen Bowman on the show last season, and we discovered that he approaches comic creating as an artist first. I approach it as a writer first. So I write a script completely, from the beginning to end, I write everything down first. I write it all out. All the dialogue's written. All of the panels are loosely described. So that way it would essentially be like if I took the script that I write for every issue and I gave it to an artist, they would have everything that they need to draw what they need to draw. And I do that for myself because that's the way my mind works first as a writer. And then what I do after I've written the script and it's edited and all that jazz, I will sit down at the drawing tablet, and I don't actually, most of the time, I don't thumbnail pages ahead of time. I have my descriptions in my script, and I will go to the drawing tablet, and it'll be just a blank page, and I will, kind of play with the layout. And usually within a half hour, I have the exact layout that I want. And sometimes it lines up with what I have in the description in the script. Sometimes it doesn't. And that's kind of where my artist brain takes over is, at that point I'm like, okay, well, this actually doesn't work because this last page looked exactly like this, so I'll have to, kind of put my artist hat on at that point and figure out what works and what doesn't, and what would be a more interesting, way to story tell, visually in this book. And so, a lot of times, and then I'll go from there. I'll do the line work. I usually, the first layer or two is just kind of sketching out the page and figuring it all out. And then I'll put a layer on that's actually the hard, line work that you'll see when it's printed. And then after that, I go into coloring. And, really, I don't have like a system to figure out the color palette. I just kind of, as I go, I figure out, if I'm coloring and I notice that something does not work, I change it up. And usually the color palette, I've actually gotten a lot of compliments for my coloring, just in the different uses of color on the same page, or, one page is all this kind of color palette and the next page is this one. And I don't really do that intentionally, which is probably sounds less impressive, but I really don't do that intentionally. It just kind of, as I work, I kind of go with the flow, and it's worked out so far. I really, going back, I can kind of tell, like, from this page to this page, this is the color palette. And I didn't really think about that while I was working it. It just naturally happened. So yeah, that's really the process. And then after that, I go in and I letter. Lettering, I think, has also been a huge difference there's been a huge difference in just my knowledge of how to letter the best way that fits the page, that, you don't, things that look right, how many words are in one dialogue bubble, how they're spaced with the it just, and really all I did with that was I looked at professional comics. And I just kind of studied the dialogue balloons, and I looked at, like, okay, so this word, this balloon, this word is on top alone. And then we have another line here, another line that's a little longer, and then it goes down. So it's more like a, the dialogue is a part of the art, and you need to have that included, and it needs to not stand out, but not, it needs to not stand out, but stand out enough that it's not obviously bad.
Yeah,
is what I'm trying to say. Like, you don't want it to exactly it needs to complement the art on the page. I think I answered your question.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it was all right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what's in the future for Memoirs?
Whew, yeah. So that, so this is, I will say this, we're on issue 7. The series, I have mapped out the big things of the series, the big plot points of the series. It's going to be about 40 issues, give or take a few here, here and there. It'll be about 40 to 45 issues long when it's done. And that's really the biggest reason why we started pumping out 3 to 4 issues a year starting this year, because otherwise I'd be 85 and it wouldn't be done. So, but I have this grand story. When it's all said and done, it's going to be broken up into 4 books. So, this book that we're currently on is the first one, and it's called The Gray Pilgrim. And And then the next one, this is the first time I've said this. The next one is actually going to be called King of Ages. So
I like that.
Yeah. So there it is. So and I can't say what the other two are because of spoilers. But so we have that one, and then we have 2 more books after that, and then that's how the story is, laid out. And I have all the major plot points done, like I said, but I have left room to just have some fun with along the way.
That is awesome and super exciting. Yeah, for sure. Well, awesome. So we have one more thing for you to do, and that is our infamous Dingoes flashcard round. And I will take Jeremy. I'll let Jeremy take it from here.
Yeah, I've burned the one that I apparently read.
The one that just kept showing up.
Yeah, that's the demon card.
Yes.
This is a would you rather.
Oh.
Would you rather put ketchup or ranch dressing on everything that you eat for the rest of your life?
I, for one, choose death.
Okay, that's not
an option. Do you not like either?
I not on most things. I guess the only
that's why this is a good question.
Yeah. I guess I just have to I would have to hate my life and just choose ketchup, because ranch, I don't like ranch as much as ketchup.
There you go.
Like ranch doesn't go on most
a little
things.
bit about you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, now that we found all about you, tell us where we can find and where people can support Memoirs of an Angel.
Thanks, man. And I do have to say, I am not comfortable on this end of it. I love being on your all's end. So thank you guys for, not making this a painful process, but a fun one. And I really appreciate that, and all the really good questions that I stumbled through. But no, everybody can, right now we are actually, we have launched issue 7 of Memoirs of an Angel on Kickstarter, and you can go to it. We have a bit.ly link. So it's bit.ly/MOA7 Kickstarter, and that will take you directly to the Kickstarter page, or you can just go to Kickstarter and search Memoirs of an Angel, and it will be the most recent issue. In general, you can go to brianrodman.com. There's also a link to the Kickstarter there. So there we go. Go to brianrodman.com. There you will find the Facebook link, the Instagram, Twitter, Kickstarter, Patreon, all the good stuff is there. You can also subscribe for my email list to get exclusive things before anybody else knows about it. And yeah, there you go.
Nice. Awesome. Well, thank you, Brian, for being both a host and a guest on our show.
And a hostess.
Ooh.
And thank you all for tuning in to the Dastardly Dingoes podcast. Remember to hit like, subscribe, and share with your friends. And also hit that bell to get notified when a new episode gets published. Have fun, be safe, and remember, kids, yellow snow makes the best snow cones. See you all next time, everyone.
Goodbye.